Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 499, Brain Room Exercises. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters, and today, I got Merrill with me, my cat. He might be out of camera range, I'm not sure, but he often purrs, so there might be a little purring in the background. So, today I will continue with the unassigned. Here I look at, what happens if you fail to meet one of your major life goals, like obtaining the career you want, and how to avoid disillusionment from your lack of success. Then it's on to brain room exercises. Here I look at, how we could prepare for our next existence and what might lie in the transition from one life to the next, or one existence to the next. This section, brain room exercises, will probably cross over into the 500th episode. The Casey Waters Show started back in 1995 in Anchorage, Alaska. In the year 2000, I moved down to Fairview, North Carolina. However, the show continued on in Anchorage, at least on a limited basis, until about 2003. Then I started airing my show in Manhattan on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. So I was up to maybe episode 168, something like that, and in 2003, and then I reset it to episode 1 since I was starting at MNN. In 2006, I started at URTV in Asheville, North Carolina. However, URTV failed a few years later. However, MNN continues on, and so I've been airing the Casey Waters Show on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for over 20 years, covering 500 episodes. I don't know if it's some kind of a record or not. Anyway, so the Casey Waters Show, is geared to deliver philosophical advice that you often might not get. Philosophical advice of an obscure and perhaps esoteric nature. After, today's show will feature background footage from the Deep Gap Trail. This is located at Mount Mitchell, North Carolina. When you get to the parking area at the summit, you park right away. The Deep Gap Trail goes off to the left. It goes through the picnic area and continues on to Mount Craig, and then Big Tom, and then it keeps going. So, now, let's continue with the unassigned. We don't have the jobs we want, or the career we want. We have to do something much different, perhaps more low paying, perhaps more humble. We gotta be subservient, a servant to the servant, a slave to the slave. For therein lies the purpose in life, to serve others. And so we have to really do it. We have to be good at it, physically, mentally. Sure, we do have a coughing cat in the background. And so I'm going to take a moment to tend to it. 4. As we serve others, we leave something behind. Our wake of influence. Sure, what we're remembered by. How people remember us. That is what is important in life. Not your status or position or career. Well, we might all fall short on that, or some of us might, and we're the unassigned. We're not assigned to the position we desire, but that's okay. What about our wake of influence? Now, there's another purring cat, so there's actually 2 cats that could be purring, and the microphone might pick them up. Especially this cat. The cat you're probably hearing is Ambrosia, who's on me and exceptionally purred. Anyway, so we gotta leave our wake of influence. Try to have people think about us in a good way. Remember us in a good way by being kind to them, by having fun with them, by making their life enjoyable. Well, often your life is more enjoyable too, at the same time. Mutual enjoyment, having fun together. Sure, that's the way to do it. Sure, that's what's important in life. Sure, God wants us to serve each other, but God wants us to have fun. We need to have fun. And even if there is no God, it still makes sense to serve each other and to have fun. Well, we gotta do both. And maybe we could even combine the two. Who knows? Perhaps it works out in certain situations. Nevertheless, we have to leave a good impression as far as what people think about us, not what they think about us by how we dress or how we talk or by what our job is, but more of how fun we're to be with, how enjoyable our company is, how much do we help people out, and other things. Our wake of influence. Sure, how do we influence others? What kind of example do we lead by? Is our behavior a good example for others to follow? Or are we just too selfish and we don't think of others' needs? And perhaps that's what other people think of us, as selfish. Well, not a very good wake of influence. Perhaps making even more people selfish because we're selfish. No, we gotta do the opposite. We gotta share, we gotta help, we gotta cooperate, and perhaps that will cause more people to share and help and cooperate, which might lead to a better situation than everybody looking out after themselves and not taking time to help others and just using all the resources to themselves when perhaps they could share. We gotta do what we can to help each other along. Sure, and we have to have independent thinking. We have to think independently to be able to do all this. This is critical when we're unassigned, when we fall short of the roles or positions we desire. We have to think independently so as to avoid disillusionment and depression. this is important. And it's important to do it quickly after the bad news of whatever, not getting the job you want. Well, you got to wake up. You got to think independently. You got to be able to do, well, what you want. And you have to be able to have fun and not worry too much about how you impress other people. Well, then we go on to retirement. Eventually, well, we're unassigned then because we're retired. Now we have all this free time. What are we going to do with it? Well, we have to have fun. And we can't always worry about impressing people. And it's much a similar situation as to not getting the job we want to begin with. Retirement is somewhat similar. We're retired. We're no longer working. Well, I guess with retirement, it's not entirely similar because now we have a lot more free time. Where if we fall short of our career, well, we're working somewhere else. Perhaps even working more. So they are somewhat different. But they have similarities in how you think about it. Because now you're not doing the job you always wanted to do, and you have to do something else. And that way it's similar to doing a different job than you want. You're still not doing the job you want for whatever reason, but with retirement, you have more free time, at least in theory. It doesn't always play out that way, of course. A lot of times activities come in and fill in the gap, more so than you realize. And you have less free time than you think you will with retirement. Well, at least that's the way it seems for me. I guess everyone's experience is a little different. And perhaps with some people, the free time is more than they want or desire. And perhaps boredom sets in. We have to be creative and find a way to have fun. Sure, you could fill in the hours of the day with some sort of activity or fun by helping others, by engaging in some sort of activity, or having fun with yourself in whatever way you want. Come on, get creative. Don't be bored in your retirement or in other situations where you have lots of free time, such as during summer, in school, or when I was in school, sure. Anyway, and of course, one of the reasons we're unassigned and fail to obtain the career we want is because of wealth concentration. There are fewer people doing the high-powered jobs, the jobs we really want. And these people are being burdened with more work than they should have to endure. It should be spread out among more people, but now it's spread out among less. So the jobs are concentrated, and the wealth is concentrated too. So there's fewer people who have a lot of money, and most people don't have enough money. That creates disillusionment. But with wealth concentration, this disillusionment is becoming more widespread as more and more people become poor and, I guess, not obtaining their dream career and thus being unassigned to the job they want. So they're falling short. And now they might be disillusioned. And there's too many of us falling short because of wealth concentration. So we have to stand up to wealth concentration with Government regulation. That's right. Big government ain't bad. Big government sometimes can be good, especially when it's kicking big corporations' ass and reducing their influence and their profits and their exploitation. We are being exploited by corporate America, and we have to stop it. Sure, by stopping wealth concentration, by sticking up for ourselves, because we don't want to be unassigned. There should be more good careers for more people, and there would be with less wealth concentration and more government regulation, more taxes on the wealthiest Americans and corporations. Yes, we could do it, and the money could be used for welfare programs to help the poorest of us, so the poorest of us are less disillusioned and depressed because we have more financial assistance from the government, so we can lead a better life. Because often, well, at one point in our life or another, we are the unemployed, and perhaps we need the government assistance, even though it's just for a little while. So all of this is important. We have to deal with wealth concentration, sure, and hopefully we could do that at the ballot box by voting for the candidates who support more government regulations and higher taxes on the wealthy. So we move along through life, and we might be unassigned. We might not get the job we want. But we don't have to be disillusioned or depressed. We could have fun with ourselves, and we could adjust our attitude to see life in a better light. Sure, we could do it in many ways, make things better for ourselves. I hope you have enjoyed this section of the Casey Waters Show. Now it is time for brain room exercises. This section will probably cross over into the 500th episode of the Casey Waters Show. Casey Waters Show started in Anchorage back in 1995 and continues on to this day, now airing in Manhattan on MNN. So, brain room exercises. Gee, what am I even talking about here? Well, I'm talking about the brain room, of course. What's the brain room? Well, that's an artificial construct of mine, an idea I came up with. See, that's what makes the Casey Waters Show unique, is I have insights that a lot of other people don't have. And these insights can be useful for figuring out the philosophical subtleties of life and navigating through life to avoid disillusionment and depression and come out better in your next existence. Well, therein hangs the tale. So, the brain room, which, as I said, is an idea I came up with. Who knows if it's real? But it seems like it might be, or something similar to it. Well, what is it? Well, it's a transition. This is where you go after you die, and where you're at before you are born. So I'm going under the assumption that there's reincarnation, that after we die, we're born again into another life. However, this might not necessarily be the case, And in fact, we might, when we die, go straight to heaven or hell, or perhaps some kind of purgatory alternative. Well, you have to deal with the brain room to get to there too. So whether you die and you're going to be reborn, or you die and you're going to heaven or hell, whatever the case, you have to deal with the brain room. In a sense, the brain room is God's judgment. However, I allow things to be a little more complicated. I like to think that they are. What am I talking about, complicated? Isn't God's judgment pretty simple? Well, I guess it is. But isn't there a little wiggle room somehow? I like to think there is. So what I'm talking about is you would negotiate with God in the brain room. Well, what does the brain room look like? The brain room is, well, it's fairly dark, dimly lit. It has some brightly colored fish tanks, with neon colors in them, along the wall. So you might have like 3 fish tanks on each wall or something. Maybe 20-gallon tanks or 50-gallon tanks. Lit up, with the aquarium lights and bright neon colored fish and neon colored plants or background. But other than that, it's kind of dark. The carpeting is a commercial carpet, gray. The surface of the brain room might not be entirely level. It either slopes downward towards the front of the brain room, or there might be a series of gentle steps that go down towards the front. Perhaps a step every 10 or 12 feet. You might step down a foot. Something like that. So I don't see many chairs, if any, so you just kind of lay on the floor or sit on the floor and just negotiating with God. Well, in the front of the brain room is a door, and it's bright behind the door. It's a bright white hallway. And the door, well, it goes into a hospital, into the maternity ward where mothers are giving birth. So you would go from the brain room through the door, and your soul would enter some woman's body, and you would be born a new baby. Anyway, but you got to negotiate with God first. You have to negotiate your next existence. You do have some wiggle room. It's not all predetermined, at least according to my beliefs. The judgment, your overall situation might be predetermined, but how you get to carry it out, how you get to learn life's lessons, so to speak, well, there might be some negotiation here, and you might be able to choose specifically how you get to learn life's lessons. It might be unpleasant, no matter what existence you choose. You still got to learn the lessons, and the lessons might be hard to learn and might require you to go through unpleasant circumstances. So it's just a matter of what unpleasant circumstances you're up to dealing with. And that's not entirely true. You might not want to deal with any of the unpleasant circumstances, the unpleasant choices that God might present before you. But you have to pick one. You have to deal with something. Of course, if you're lucky, it might not be all unpleasant. Perhaps you already learned life's lessons, and perhaps you're ready to go to heaven. Well, if that's the case, you would negotiate with God for your role in heaven, what you might do in heaven. Perhaps even entertainment in heaven is negotiable. Who knows? But you negotiate nevertheless, whether you're negotiating what your role in heaven might be like, or you're negotiating what your next existence might be like. There's some flexibility, and you do have some input, at least according to me, at least according to this concept of the brain room, which lies between death and the next existence, where you negotiate with God. Well, you have to look at the big picture. Sure, things are a little more complicated than we realize. And so, well, there's the imaginary territories between us and God that we are associated with. And so, perhaps our imaginary territory might be there with us as we negotiate with God. Perhaps the imaginary territory might act as a go-between between us and God. But whatever, as our values change in our life, our imaginary territory that we are associated with changes. The East Side favoring honesty and compassion, where the West Side favors deceit and wealth concentration, and everybody is on their own, where the East Side likes to support each other, and especially the less fortunate amongst us, lifting them up to a better existence, where the West Side says, well, you have to fare on your own and do your best, and maybe with a little deception you might get ahead in the game, where the East Side says you have to be honest, and so on and so on. And if you're not honest, well, you might be kicked out of the East Side and perhaps end up in the Central region, in between the East Side and the West Side. Or if you're really dishonest, you might be booted right over to the West Side.
Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, caseywaters2@caseywaters.com.